Hello, Auntie.
Hi, Auntie.
It's gonna be 35 minutes of laughter.
Hi, Auntie.
Sister Auntie.
Brother, Auntie. But not actually related, which everyone here thinks we are. I'm like, dude,
It's a compliment.
two brown people, two good-looking brown
It's a good
people.
looking- I wonder whether it's because we look similar that they assume that, because also the other interpretation could be like, y'all are together.
Well, I think it's because we're both brown. And like we're kind
Yeah.
of the same color brown.
Okay.
And what is it?
Too close.
Brown faces and white spaces.
Definitely a white space here.
Yeah, it's a lot of
Very white.
yikes.
Not aggressively white, but definitely melanin devoid.
I mean, everybody's here to snag that melanin. We're in Costa Rica after all.
That's right.
Anyways, back to you, Auntie. Uh,
So like look, we keep having conversations, and I think what we want to do is just record some of them.
It's true.
And through the process of recording them and urging ourselves to um catalog our process, I think there's gonna be a lot of like interesting insights that come out for ourselves and for anyone that cares about what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a really fascinating experience to like, we've both been in Costa Rica for like, I don't know, since January. So like roughly 6 months,
Mm.
uh, give or take, whatever. And like this visceral, like, Beta, I need Indian food. I feel like, it's like a reminder of like the potency of our culture.
Mm.
Like, not having it for so long, like in the form of edibles.
You get spoiled in a place like Toronto where you can have any food at any time, and of course you have access to your mother's home cooking, which is,
Yeah, totally.
you sort of reminded how ephemeral and yet knowable that is,
Yeah.
right?
I think it's like the whole like that's so true, but then the whole lack of everything. It's like I haven't seen a lot of brown culture,
Mm,
and it's not even brown
mm,
Asian culture, Asian flavors.
mm.
So it's like not just in the belly, but like it penetrates throughout in like every way.
You say Asian, what's your boundary for Asian?
Um, Ooh, good question. I don't know. Like I think of like everything from like Chinese food to Japanese foods, Thailand to
Mm,
Malaysia. I mean, as so like if we're talking about India as like this part, as
mhm.
we move east of India, the foods are still like Malaysian food is still kind of similar. Thai food, there's like something like kind of like that curry sensation, like similarities. And as you move further and further east, the flavor profile shifts further away from like Indian food. And like
Mm.
Indian food is like also.
37 distinct cuisines. So,
I mean, yeah, and I guess like being North Indian, like
mm,
it's the North Indian cuisine is like more ubiquitous in Toronto at least,
mm,
or maybe North American culture, like
mm.
butter chicken. I don't know why I went like this because it's a thing, but like
Share on video, and you can. Bunny ears.
uh
Do y'all eat rabbit though? Is bunny is it like a bunny? Is it like a butter
I don't
rabbit?
know, I grew up vegetarian, so like my household's vegetarian and so like
But like your whole, like you grew up vegetarian, your whole family was
my
vegetarian.
whole family, like my whole immediate family, and then aside from my immediate family, like my cousins and people that ate meat,
Yeah,
it felt like it was predominantly like chicken
yeah.
and lamb.
Okay.
Not beef was like rarely never because like we're also Hindu, so like you
Mm,
know, and then fish not so much either. I guess because we're like North India, like there's not.
no
But again,
access
this
to
is my like individual experience. Like I don't know the data points of all of North India, but
no, we're not
or
gonna be able
all
to
of all of
speak.
Punjab. Sorry,
We're
but
not gonna
like
be able to speak on behalf of 1.3 billion people
as per the
for
Indian
10,000
diaspora,
years. So
as per the
not the two
Indian
of us.
diaspora in Toronto that I experienced in my little incubated version.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true though. I think when you think about Indian food, even as someone who's born in India, like what comes up most immediately isn't even Goan food, which is what I know very personally, but like Indian food as I hear most people reference it is really North Indian food.
Wait, you were born in India?
I was born in Goa.
Oh, but then you
Ask me anything.
Uncle G, Auntie G.
Brothers, brother, auntie.
But
I
wait, so you were born in Goa,
mhm.
but then you grew up in Abu Dhabi, or you went to school in Abu Dhabi.
Lived in Abu Dhabi, went to school there. Both my younger sisters were born in Abu Dhabi. And we always had a close tie with Goa because from Abu Dhabi to Goa is a 3 hour flight. And so you could
Oh
like
shit,
there's a
that's
shuttle.
it.
Yeah, you could go for the weekend if you wanted. Which a
Oh,
lot which you would.
oh, that's so nice. Oh, that makes okay. So I, for some reason, I didn't. First of all, know that the Middle East and Goa were that close together.
Yeah,
I thought Bali and India were close together, but it's a 10-hour flight.
yeah,
Learned that lesson.
yeah.
I was like, oh, I'm just gonna go to Bali. Um, wow, that's fascinating. Oh, that makes so much sense. Now I understand some of the like how you have so much information about like your grandma's kitchen
Yeah,
and
like
like
telling you about drawing water is like I spent a lot of those just fucking around. Like you want to go hang out with your grandmother, go look in the kitchen first, right? And
yeah.
then the kitchen wasn't just like a throwaway place at the back in a hovel. Like the kitchen was a huge space. Kitchen had to be a huge space because all the food was so laborious. You needed space for each person to do a different task. And everything was done from scratch. So like even a minor thing like make coconut milk or grate coconut is like, okay, pull out this coconut scraper, smash a coconut,
Well,
scrape it out.
why did they do it from scratch? Is it because that's like what was up, or because they didn't have access to? Is it like fresh everything? Was that the vibe of your household?
Yeah, it wasn't even that. It's just like, okay, so I didn't realize this until recently, but Goa has the highest GDP per person out of any Indian state. It's about 2.5 times the national average. And Goa was a Portuguese colony until the 1960s, right?
Mm.
And so the cuisine, the traditions all grew up during this time of being a relatively small population, like a few 100,000 people who all had money and all had this power structure of having indentured servants in their households. So you never had to cut corners. You just would do the work, which is why now trying to recreate some of these recipes, you're like, this is so fucking laborious. And you're like, yeah, because it was invented during a time where labor was extremely cheap. And what else were you doing? Right? Like they didn't get TV or internet really until the last like few decades. And so a lot of your life had to do with like looking for food and making the food and then taking a nap after. Right? So like scraping coconut, you're
That's
like,
like
yeah,
beach life,
scrape the coconut.
also. No?
Totally. Yeah. Susagad, like, here in Costa Rica, there's pura vida,
Yeah.
which is like, relax, like everything is good, relax. The Goan equivalent is susagad. Susagad
Susika.
is just, yeah, chill, relax.
Yeah.
But it's also like in the same way the locals will use pura vida here is like pura vida is, yes, it's good, but there's a dark side to pura vida, which is that if everything is chill, then you don't like turn it on at different points, right?
Right.
You take things too casually because everything is so at peace and everything is so abundant that you're not really hustling. And so Susagad means now, Susagad is such a great way to live, but also it means that you
Mm.
need to turn it on at times. And where are you drawing that strength from? Because there was no struggle, right? For 4 centuries, the
Interesting.
Portuguese colonialization, plus God knows thousands of years before that, was such a lush, abundant place. They never really had to work that hard. And of course, now I'm speaking from a place of privilege, which is like my family's experience in not being on the side of servitude, right?
Mm.
Um, but anyway, that's a long tangential answer. But it is to say that so many of the foods enjoy this abundance of time and access, which is why you look at a Goan dinner or like Goan food arrangement, and it looked like you fucking massacred every living thing to make one
I've not seen
sitting.
that. I've
Oh my
never seen
goodness.
like a table full of going
It
food.
takes a pool table just to hold every dish because like everyone's like, okay, where's the mutton dish? Where's the beef dish? Where's your
Really, I didn't
fish
realize
dish?
you guys consume so much like animal protein.
My mom and sister laughed at me when I asked for vegan going dishes because it makes no sense. Like what? But we have access to everything, and also because Goa
Whoa.
was like historically Catholic, there was no aversion to eating any animal.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, because like religion, you can't untangle religion from culture in almost any atmosphere.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in, well, I was born in Toronto, born and raised in Toronto. My parents were first generation Canadians or
Mm,
the immigrants of India.
mm,
And like I remember my mom telling me that my aunt had to bring Indian groceries from Brampton to like Markham Scarborough area where my parents lived
Mm,
because that was the only Indian grocery store. And so they would give her the order
crazy.
like, okra, all the spices and like, Indian carrots to make halva and other sabjis with and like because you just couldn't get those vegetables in the regular supermarket. And and so I grew up, although like not in like the environment of like of India, in a household that incubated everything Indian.
Mm.
But
Which is
our
kind of what we're trying to do here too, right?
it's true. But like also being Hindu, like when I go to India, I experience India as like every menu I see is like 50+% vegetarian and then 50% maybe meat, if at
Mhm.
all. So it's so like alarming for me to hear that this other part of India is like, give me all the animal that you can and skewer it for me, please.
Honestly,
Like,
I mean, 30, like I'm not even making this up. This is 37 distinct different Indian cuisines in India.
yeah,
And you can appreciate why, right? Because there's this crosshatch of history and fauna and religion and
yeah,
cultural practice.
yeah.
And so a place like Goa is like right on the coast, so you're gonna get all the shellfish. Because of the Catholicism, there's like no aversion to eating any land animals, so eat all of that. Plus, it was a port, so you had access to really every spice from every part, and no aversion, right? And this is kind of why Goa was like this open port for like Goa was a destination for so long when the rest of India was like maybe unapproachable for people because it was a port city, so it always was a welcoming regardless of what your stripe was. So you could drink alcohol, and so there's like you're drinking, you're eating bread and rice and veggies
Well,
and spice and mayo, and
we
it's like,
won't
give us
get
everything.
into it now, but like right now, I'm like going through a decolonized version, of the indigenous version of
Mm,
Vedanta, like my ancestral lineage. So let's call it
mm,
the Hindu lineage of like what it was prior to colonization.
mm,
And there was so much influence by the colonizers
mm,
that shifted the text. And
mm,
so nowhere does it really say to not eat animal products.
mm.
Anyways, we'll leave that over there. We'll get to that later. But
Yeah.
so thanks, Auntie. And so like here we are, both in Costa Rica
Yeah.
in a
Messy histories aside, we have like now a shared history in this moment.
yeah, exactly.
We're
We're
making history.
both being here in Costa Rica,
Mm,
and we're currently in a town called Nosara.
mm,
Um, despite being in a blue zone
mhm,
and having all of this lush fruit and vegetable around us,
mm,
um, there is still like a bit of a homogeneity in the food that we have surrounding us.
mhm,
Like Costa Rican food has it's pretty like it's pretty tight on the beans and rice
mhm,
and your protein of sorts. Um, And then we're noticing like other foods that we've had at like restaurants or places around here, they're really tailored towards the cute vegan, gluten-free,
hippie. The yoga hippies.
the acai bowl, kind of the green salad, and I'm like all for it.
It's the culture of the people that are here, right?
Right.
Who predate maybe some more Indian establishment. Because if I think about like, you hear the stories about what this place is, it used to be a surf town settled by like residents of Malibu,
But yeah, and then like
right?
when we're craving Indian food and we're like looking at the geography of how to go outwards, it's like
Yeah.
literally like San Jose,
Mm,
which is the capital of Costa Rica, which is like 5 hour drive from here,
mm,
is the closest place that we can get to Indian food.
mhm. Well, and then there are
And I'm just
supposedly other
like
little outposts,
supposedly,
Tamarindo, Liberia, Santa Teresa.
supposedly, yeah.
But it is strange because also you don't, to your earlier point, like you don't really see Chinese food. Whereas like if you think about the US, there are more Chinese restaurants than McDonald's, right? Like
Is
Chinese,
that a fact?
that is a fact.
Yo, Auntie facts.
I do fast. Yeah. Yeah, but it's like it's how Chinese people as they moved and spread, like carried their culture
Mm,
and also started to create little cottage industries to become self-sustaining,
mm,
right? And so like in a place like Costa Rica, and I mean maybe we're in a dead zone for this type of stuff because we haven't traveled extensively through the country, but it's also a country of 5 million people. So like there are only so many places that has the density to invite this type of experience, right? But you don't really see a lot of Chinese restaurants. Now, strangely, there is one Chinese restaurant none of us have been to by the Chinese grocery or the Chinese owned grocery store.
Oh,
Like
interesting.
attached to the Renemas is the Asiatica Restaurante,
Okay.
where there are people inside, and I feel
I
like
have seen it. They
yeah,
have very fluorescent lights in there.
yes.
So, okay, so what's interesting, like, so we're doing a paleo pop-up Indian restaurant. And like when I
Wait, freeze. Paleo,
vegan-ish
veganish,
pop-up.
Indian food pop up. Okay, good, good.
Yeah, paleo vegan-ish pop-up Indian restaurant.
Okay.
Okay, so like some may think like paleo. Okay, let's take it a step back.
Mm,
When I go eat Indian food out in
mhm,
the world, like
mhm,
restaurant life,
mhm.
I have stomach aches. Like I like literally know that like my stomach will hurt the next day or within hours shortly afterwards. Like
Why?
I don't know, like maybe it's the combination of like the amount of oil they use, the type of oil they
Mm,
use, maybe the amount of dairy or cream that's like
mm,
slides in or the quality of ghee. I don't know. I don't know. But like literally growing up, like, oh my God, like don't get me wrong, like going to Indian restaurants is like, ugh, so lush
mm,
and so delicious.
mhm.
But there's a ubiquitous like, "Mm, maybe my tummy's gonna hurt after this." But that's like, and I'm Indian.
Right.
And then, actually serving people as we were like talking about this idea, like talking to people around us,
Mm,
honestly, like every other person said, yeah, I love Indian food. And I know
mm.
when I eat Indian food, it's so worth it. And I take the day off the next
Yeah.
day kind of vibe. Like I'm like cognizant that tomorrow my tummy's gonna hurt.
What other food do you make that kind of space for in your life?
Chinese food.
Really? You need
So,
to take the day off after Chinese food,
okay, no, specifically Hakka food.
which is again Indian food.
It's Indian Chinese food.
Yes. So the common thread is Indian food.
Yeah,
I can't think of any other food I'm eating where I'm like, oh, like as much as the Costa Rican food is boring, you
never
feel like
makes.
a hero.
Yeah, your stomach doesn't hurt after.
Yeah.
I don't know any other Indian food or any other food that you would put a rest day next to for your
Right.
belly.
Well, you need a rest hour afterward because
Yeah, comatose.
like your insulin is just like in overdrive. Then you're like kind of need to be indoors or at home because you don't know how it's going to move through your system. And then the next day you might be hungover because you've just taken this like caloric shock through your system and everything else is like just trying to, re-regulate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that it? Like 24 hours. And yet, people make it a point to eat Indian food. So what's the point? Like if it's taking this much time and energy out of you, why bother eating Indian food?
It's delicious. I think it's less so that it's the spices, not the spicy,
Mm,
right? Like the flavor of spices is unique
mm,
and there's like a okay, let's see. So like when you have a plate, okay, and again we're referencing kind of North Indian food
mm.
in this. I don't know actually if that's true. North Indian food, dosa, like South Indian food, like we've really divided the country in kind of two when there's many more, right? Yeah,
37.
37. Okay. And so when eating Indian food, it's like all the flavors
Mm,
amass on the plate. Like, so you actually like don't know what your bite's gonna taste like, right?
mm,
Because you have like, different sabjis on your plate. You have like aloo gobi over here, you have saag paneer over here, you
mm,
have like malai kofta here. Not to say, I mean, that's like actually a really nice plate for me, but
mm,
and then you're eating it with naan or rice. And so you could have a scoop of just aloo gobi or just one of the other, but when they start melding together, you don't know what flavor profile you're gonna receive.
mm,
And then the vehicle to get these things into your mouth is delicious. It's naan,
mm,
it's biryani, it's it's some sort of like maybe like a roti. Like either way, it's a chilla. It's delicious.
mm,
And so I think it's such a unique combination of comforting and soothing and like exotic or like exciting for some folks, and satisfying.
mhm,
Like, I don't actually ever drink alcohol when I eat Indian food
mm,
because it's weird. That's a weird combination because there's so much here.
mm,
What is this drink doing over
mm,
here? This beer or this wine is throwing off my spiciness. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what your experience is in that, but
mm,
um, so then going back to paleo vegan-ish
mm,
Indian food. So this is like, I think it's super easy to like adapt the Indian kitchen to be in alignment with the health conscious human being, like myself, for example. So like I'm gluten free and dairy free, and my sister's like super vegan. She doesn't even
Mm,
eat ghee, for example.
mm,
And we've had to adapt our kitchen and we've not compromised on flavor at all.
right.
And so like, and my stomach never hurts when I eat home cooked Indian food.
Mhm.
Like literally never.
So I think like in that statement is actually there's a couple of things, right? One is when you go to a restaurant, you go to any restaurant, they're always adding stuff to increase the pleasure of your meal, right? So
It's the
yes, of
MSG of
course,
life.
part of it is to appreciate like eating all the right foods. But yeah, to add an extra layer, like I mean, even like a non-Indian restaurant, adding butter to everything is like the hack to life. Why does it taste delicious? Because there's fucking butter in it, and that's a cheap hack. Or add bacon to it, and that's a cheap hack, right? And so the Indian version might be adding like cream, right?
Yeah.
Which is a lot. And if you're not eating like that, then all of a sudden you're getting like half a cup of cream, which your body's not used to. That's one thing. I think another one is just like indulgence, right?
Yes.
When you're eating at home, you can eat and
Yes.
then eat and then eat again, but like you're sitting there and you're like, oh my God, look at all these flavors and how am I going to eat all these things? Portion control super, super hard because all of a sudden you're just like inhaling this stuff. Sometimes the spice of the food also encourages intake because you can't stop eating. Otherwise, you're going to be like huffing and puffing and dripping sweat.
Is that a thing?
I noticed that. I noticed that like if you got something spicy, you kind of want to keep the food going until you want to stop and then you kind of extinguish it and move to dessert or have your beer or whatever,
Okay.
right? It's less of like snacking. I mean, I'm talking about like Indian dinners, right? And of course there's probably Indian appetizers and beachside snacks and stuff. But actually I wonder if some of this stuff we're talking about is like we're 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 referencing Indian restaurants who have a different incentive structure when you go there compared to eating at
True.
home because none of us seem to get that sick when you eat your mother's home cooking or like home cooking, but also they don't have to add all these hacks because they can take the time to develop flavor. You can have things at a much more leisurely pace. They're using better quality ingredients, and then fuck, if you want more they'll just make you more.
It's true. And I like, so then taking that into the next step of making this like a balanced meal, like anytime I'm like my parents, my family's vegetarian, and so
Mm,
when I see their plate, I'm like, Mom, there's carbs on carbs on carbs
mm,
stacked here, right? Like roti, aloo gobi, another like, like all these dishes like that are I keep referencing aloo gobi because it's my dad's favorite.
mm,
And I'm like, Dad, that's cauliflower and potato,
mm,
and you're eating like whole wheat, like whole grain flour with that. Like,
mhm. It doesn't seem right, but like when you have these conversations with Italians, they're like, yeah, you eat pasta, and then you eat some more pasta, and you might have some bread on the side. But the funny thing is, it's just how it's been done. And of course, you hear about a lot of celiacs in Italian households, but also there's some people that just need to run on that, and their bodies are healthy for that. And so I wonder sometimes if we're putting our Western lens on actually a biochemistry and a physiology that actually suits the people who have lived that way and who have grown up in those traditions.
so okay, fucking facts right there. Like
Mm,
that's very like important to reference, like our cellular intelligence, our cellular biology, and like
mm,
what we actually need to be sustained.
mm.
I notice that I need potato, I need starches to like when I cut that, I'm like, somebody lift me. I can't do anything. Um, but then I don't know. And then I look at my parents and I look at their physiology and I question that. And I wonder also like where our sedentary lifestyles has like
I'm with you.
if it's a whole collage of things, but it sounds like for both of us it starts in the kitchen because that's like
It's
I don't know.
everything, man. It's
I like
everything.
I don't know how we're
It's
gonna
what you're made of. It's what you're made of. What you put in your mouth is what you're made of.
well,
So
we're living together for the next month. So like
yes,
how are and, like our kitchen is just gonna explode and blossom. It's gonna be
beautiful.
so blue. Yeah, it's gonna be so lush. Um, but so okay, so now that's our parents, but now
Mm,
bringing Indian food and adapting it for people like you and I, or
mm,
people like the people in this town that we're in right now who don't eat carb on carb on carb,
mhm,
but need or desire to at least have a balanced meal,
mhm.
or what they perceive. let's say it that way, what they perceive to be a balanced meal.
Mhm,
What does that look like?
mhm,
And I think this is where paleo, vegan-ish kind of
mhm.
cooking comes in. Because when I was in India last year, pre-pandemic, obviously, um, I would have killed somebody for a kale salad that wasn't sawed, that wasn't cooked down all the way through to its
Fresh
bones. I
veggies?
was like,
What are you
please,
talking about?
please give me a salad. Like,
I can also appreciate why that doesn't exist in the tradition because also like food safety and
yeah,
flavor
yeah,
and transportability, right? So like
yeah.
I think like that's part, and maybe there's something we need to chart is like take some of these dishes, appreciate they were invented in a specific time, place, access knowledge, and now sort of move them forward, understanding what we know more broadly about like medicine and health over the long run, right? And take some of these things and adapt it. Like why make like some of these dishes out of like wilted spinach when you can make it out of something like kale, which wasn't accessible in those days, but also is really great at fiber and color and holds
Yeah.
flavor really well, right?
I mean, also we're in Costa Rica and their spinach is very different than our spinach at
Mm,
home.
mm,
Like we have different produce here, and so eating locally, I think, is like hypercritical at
mhm,
the success of your body's ability to digest. Like you said, for our family or generational family,
mm,
cool. Like how do we adapt that to Nosara, Costa Rica now?
mhm,
How do we adapt that to like Toronto and like wherever we are?
mhm,
TLDR,
mhm.
Thanks Auntie is
The name of our pop-up, the working title of this project.
uh a paleo veganish Indian restaurant that's not going to give you a stomach ache,
Mm,
that's going to help you feel like your soul and your body feel whole at
mm.
the end of it, and a way for us to just fuck with flavor profiles as like being part of the Indian diaspora and like bringing our food to like our
Our
bellies.
our own kitchen and into our own mouths.
like okay, so like but that's how it started, right? I'm like, hey, Marlon, you want to go halvesies on like a really expensive pack of garam masala so we could have some Indian food?
Well, maybe that's a good point to talk about like where does thanks auntie even come from? Like what does that even mean? What does that mean to you?
Well, as we've discussed, auntie is used very differently in both of our cultures. And so anyone that's like an elderly, unrelated, brown looking person, Indian looking person, I would call auntie.
Mm,
And so naturally, like so many cultures, if I were to go to someone's house, the first thing they're going to want to do to me is feed and water me,
mm.
right? So like
Aggressively.
aggressively. And this like thanks auntie, like like that it's just this like generous spirit of auntie
Mm,
and like gratitude for that spirit and like I don't know. I just like when I think of that, when I think of like thinking of like thanking an auntie,
mm.
it's usually thanks auntie, I can't have any more food. Or thanks auntie, it was delicious. It's centered around food.
Mm,
'Cause like, I mean, let's be real. There's a generational cultural gap in our ability to communicate about certain things.
mm,
So unless I'm eating or listening,
mm,
it might be a short-lived interaction.
mm,
I don't know. Like I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. Like that
mm.
seems to be,
That's what comes up.
I guess so.
Mhm,
But also like Auntiehood is rooted in food.
mm,
No, like when I think of a sister or a dad or like an uncle or like none of that has the same shininess as Auntie.
mm,
Auntie, I'm gonna come over. Please, can you make me that sabji? Like, I think of one of my aunts. I was like, can you please make me chocolate burfi? I'm coming over. I'm coming home.
mm,
And there's always like a pleasure
mm.
in doing so.
Yeah, the currency of care in Auntiehood is food
Yeah, it's like, no problem, beta. What time are you coming? Okay, great,
and an
beta.
abundance of food, like three times more than you could possibly eat, right? So like to contrast, like I like my aunties are people in my family tree, right?
Mm,
Like Goans didn't really use auntie in that way, and of course Goa is in India, and so of course you like map to some of these traditions, but um, we would use the term auntie like jokingly.
Mm.
because it didn't really reference, um, like we didn't use it casually in sort of like as a sign of respect, though we understood it to be one. And you could hear other people using it, auntie, uncle, broadly, and that's an Asian thing. I've heard that in like Singapore. I've heard that in Hong Kong. So it's not just an Indian thing, right? But when I think about like auntiehood here, I think about auntie as like as a type of care,
Yeah.
right? And a type of gratitude because in those spaces when you're with your female caregivers in that community of people, that is emblematic of how they, you know, communicated with you. They wanted to make sure you had all the food and drink you had. I acknowledge that they would always make sure that you were eating and you were mostly done eating before they started eating so that they
Facts.
knew that they could monitor you and keep moving things out of the kitchen or
Yeah.
have asked maids to top things up or to start different things. And so I think of it as just like broadly a type of care.
Mm.
And then from my perspective, because I always benefited from this, was like a type of gratitude for this generous care that you could not stop even if you wanted to. Like no amount of pleading would do that. And you actually had to eat because now you were being offensive by not receiving care because that's actually how care was being given, right?
Yeah.
It's being offered. And so hopefully that's how this is being received is like, I hope that what we're doing is caring for each other and for ourselves and bringing that type of care to our community, which we have become like rooted in and we like can see familiar faces. I feel very familiar here now. So it's bringing the care to this community and then also expressing a type of gratitude for holding us and for allowing us to share space here by doing what I know to work extremely well, which is to open up the kitchen and share something as ephemeral and um, memorable as great food, right?
Well, I think something I missed the absolute most during COVID was cooking for, cooking with,
Mm,
or being cooked for
mm,
people, right? And here it's like, okay, I can feed you. Like, Marlon,
mm,
come over, let me
mm,
feed you. And
mm,
instead of like just feeding, well, if I'm going to feed you, we might as well feed the village, was
mm.
kind of the attitude we like
Totally.
quickly adopted.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm really excited to like extend the generosity and like that spirit of auntyhood to like everybody here.
And everyone knows it here, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's so because of the community here being mainly Americans and Canadians, everyone's had great Indian food. This is not a surprise. Maybe a lot of Costa Ricans just have not been exposed to that because it doesn't exist as a permanent fixture right here.
They did not. If I translated my poor Spanish correctly,
Mm,
most of them that I've talked to had
mm,
not tried Indian food.
mm. Even though the ingredients are here, it's such a lush place, tons of great produce, and of
Yeah.
course spices are making their way here. But it's just being exposed to it, right? It would be cool to actually know that some people have taken inspiration and now they're choosing to make some of these dishes for themselves when we're long gone,
Oh, I
right?
know.
Like, oh, I missed this dish and like, can I have the recipe and I want to make it at home because these are accessible things. And especially if it's like vegan paleo, like it's not expensive because it doesn't rely on a ton of protein.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So, like, we got our spices imported from the US
Mm,
for our usage.
mm,
But I think that's like maybe in part because we haven't been here long enough to like
mm,
find out where we can get spices from here locally in Costa Rica. Like,
mm,
just found that guy that
mm,
makes his garam masala here.
mhm.
So excited to try cooking with that.
An Argentine sitar player
Yes,
makes garam
Santos.
masala. Amazing.
And because like the spices here, I don't know if you've noticed, are so potent.
Mm,
Like they're very like I remember like so as like an Indian, I definitely season and spice the shit out of all my food
mm,
because I like the spicy flavor.
mm.
And so I don't know, I think this is a bad habit from my dad of putting like black pepper on things before I even try it sometimes. But here the black pepper is like sharp, it's strong and it
Yep,
it you could feel that freshness.
yep.
Um, so I'm like really excited, like maybe through our explorations and the offerings that we put forward to this community that we'll discover
Mm,
some of the like local versions of this.
mhm,
It's kind of nice to like keep it local in
mhm,
every capacity.
mhm. Flavor, like there's a wisdom in that, in something tasting good as well, right? There's something that your body is seeking out because as much as it may not be a vitamin, it may be something from an Ayurvedic tradition that allows you to boost your immunity or reduce inflammation or allow you to survive some of these mosquito bites or
You
whatever
know,
else you're going through, right?
it's like haldi dud, aka golden milk latte, and
Yeah.
like
Yeah. It looks good, it tastes good, but actually it is good because your body needs more than just like macronutrients to survive. It's these like minerals, it's some of these things that like you may not fully understand, I'm sure somebody understands them. I don't, but maybe we'll learn through this process, and that's kind of
well,
the beauty of the exercise, right?
like what kind of like upset me a little bit was how when I was younger,
Mm,
I would always be like, "Oh, like mom, I don't want to drink haldi dud, like turmeric milk. I don't want to drink this. Like, what's the point? Blah blah blah."
yeah.
And then I remember when like science came out into the mainstream that turmeric is anti-inflammatory. And I'm like, oh shit, okay. Or like when I saw khichdi in this like very hipster fancy um I don't know, place in Vancouver. And I was like, selling khichdi for like $15 a bowl. I was like, dude, this is like
What is khichdi?
khichdi is like dal and
Mm,
rice blended in and made in a cooker,
mm,
a pressure cooker.
mm,
And so it turns into this like savory like porridge,
mm,
you could say. But this is like healing food. Like
mm,
you would eat this when you were sick and have a little bit of pickled like achar, like pickled something with
mm,
it or yogurt with it, homemade yogurt with it. And that's like what you would eat when you're not feeling well.
mm,
And it's also very cheap to make,
mhm,
like very cheap. And then I'm seeing it being like commoditized for like so much money. And
mm,
I think that was like it's unfortunate. I mean, I think it's a byproduct of colonization
mm,
and like assimilation that we have I have distanced myself from my Indian heritage when I
mm,
was younger.
mm,
And now that it's coming out in the world, like, if you were younger, actually, I heard this story the other day
mm,
on that clubhouse conversation that I was speaking, you were present with, we were having,
mm,
where one of the panelists, he was telling the story of how his brother opened up his lunch, and he's a school teacher. His brother opened up his lunch, and it was leftover Indian food.
mm,
And all the kids in his class, all the kids in this teacher's class was like, "Wow, it smells so good. What's that smell like? What's that aroma? That's delicious." But when I was younger, if I would, I didn't want to bring Indian food to school because it would be like, "Ew, what's that smell?" Like it was like it wasn't like a welcomed association.
mhm,
And so just in like our existence in itself, we've seen just such a cultural shift leaning into Indian
mhm.
food.
Totally.
Also, there's a huge yoga culture here, and like so many people like are very familiar with like Indian practices,
Mhm,
Indian or ancestral kind of stemmed practices because of this yoga culture. So
mhm,
in that way, it's kind of not surprising that they are down with Indian food.
mhm,
But to close that story, uh, I think it's really exciting to bring our stories and associations and like kind of shift our cultural relationship to food and also witness other people perhaps shifting their relationship to not tummy ache food, but like something that's nutritious and delicious.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
I know.
probably all of us have reached the limits. Like we've given it an honest attempt. I think we've all done this, by the way. Your story around like rejecting your mother's cooking. We've all done versions of this to our mothers and grandmothers and stuff, especially coming from like a Western um, mindset. Because there were always like off the shelf remedies. Like I remember, getting sick and like requesting Dimetapp or Robitussin, and my mom would start her witch's brew in the kitchen, and we always be like, "What are you doing? Like, there is an answer for this, right?" But then, as it turns out, like actually, there's a lot of wisdom to using lemongrass and flaxseed, right? And the cooking, like as much as we think about our aunties, my the women in our family as being the cooks in our families, they were actually like witches, right? The bruise went well beyond what you were eating. The bruise went into things that were going to help your hair and things that were going to help you sleep and things were going to help you in illness, things are going to clear your skin. And so it was more than just the foods you put into your body, it was how to manipulate the natural world to your aid through your human life.
Mm,
And all of that stuff was always oral tradition, right?
yeah.
And deeply understood, and then
Mm.
never really scrutinized maybe in their generations, but then all of a sudden we come around and we're like, well, I just saw an ad for this thing and it stops congestion in its steps. And you're like, and those women must have just been like, you poor little child, like you are missing centuries, millennia of knowledge in this space, and you don't understand the complexity with which we operate. Because, yes, you may take a short fix here, but what happens to the second order outcome? Like if you take an antibiotic, well, you just obliterated all your gut bacteria. So maybe you don't want to obliterate all your gut bacteria. Maybe you want to manipulate it so that you don't have to then treat a side effect, which is then,
Yeah.
so I know I'm getting off a tangent, but like, I
No.
think for us, it's like like going through the Western system, giving it an honest attempt, taking Tylenol and Dimetapp, and then realizing the limitations of that makes you go back and say, well, what did I miss? Because there are ancestral remedies, and not just from Indian traditions. There's so many remedies that come from all kinds of indigenous traditions that have helped people over time. And maybe we need to look at it a little bit more closely, because there could be something more sustainable for us as like human animals, more sustainable for us in our natural environments, and for us also like not being so ignorant to overlook how the natural world and us can act in concert to keep each other healthy, right? Like we belong in these systems and yet we operate outside of them.
Yes.
Makes no sense.
Makes no sense.
Especially if you think about the whole lifetime and existing in systems, which we all do.
So I love that you shared that because it kind of brings more of like a wholeness or like a more ecosystem based approach when you
Mm,
think of like auntyhood,
mm,
right? Because like if I'm caring for my community, I
mm,
can't neglect the plants or the
mm,
animals. I can't neglect the children or the elderly. Like
mm,
aunties like hold it down. Like they are like the linchpin of family of and then family being by extension community.
mm,
And so like what you just described is just like let's loop in every like planar field of time with that too. Let's loop in our ancestors and our future, like our future babies and things like that, and the planet and the environment and
mm.
what's around me that I could use. And I totally agree. Like that's like, you know, part witch, part healer, part, community organizer, part, I don't know, many and many more fill in the blanks.
Mhm,
Dinner host.
mhm. Just
Care
center, right? Center
center.
of so many
Yeah.
things. And so many of us have benefited from that ethos, that unspoken general care from a generation after generation of women who
Mm.
mostly thanklessly did this work, and mostly silently did this work, you know.
Yeah, and I think normalizing men to be aunties as well
Mm,
is really important
mhm,
because like I think yeah, like for a whole gender to miss out on auntyhood feels kind of sad.
don't know what you're missing.
You don't know what you're missing, but also we don't know what we're missing because like
Mm,
it'd be nice to receive that mutual care
mm,
and from like one another. And with the idea of like gender roles kind of slowly dissolving in some way or another,
mm,
it could possibly create a gap
mm,
where maybe the female figure doesn't take on that auntyhood position from a gender-based stance.
mhm,
And then who's the auntie in the situation?
mhm,
And it's like, can't we all be aunties?
mhm.
Can't we all be aunties together, brother auntie?
Totally. Yeah, I'm all about that. I love that. I love that.
So thanks.
Hosting, care,
So thanks, auntie.
gratitude.
Yeah.
Thanks, Auntie.
Paleo veganish Indian restaurant. Okay.
Coming soon.
Welcome to our exploration.
And to our lab. But you're
Yeah,
not really seeing the kitchen over there. It's not a big lab, but it's competent.
it's doable. There'll be a pour over here for sure.
Yeah. End it there for today.
Thanks, Auntie.
Thanks, Auntie. Let's hope that all recorded.
Let's hope that all works.